lights and cameras and mirrors.
Oh, hello. So in an effort to fully dive into my hobby of collecting Blu-rays, I've decided to really deep dive into some of these sets I've bought in the past year and a half. A lot of boutique Blu-rays. I hate that term. It's like IDM for intelligent dance music. I hate that term, but the nerds will know what I mean. I've really been digging Powerhouse Indicator for about the last year and a half. They're somewhere in between Arrow and Criterion. As we all know, Criterion has very prestigious art house films. Arrow kind of lifts up a lot of weird ones and has a lot of underappreciated horror classics. Powerhouse Indicator kind of does both of these things. It has some very British releases, some very old Hollywood releases, and then everything in the middle, lots of weird horror, underappreciated things. They have full sets devoted to, classic people in film like Marlene Dietrich, Samuel Fuller, John Ford, but then we also have the Norman J. Warren box set. I did a video on that box set here. Today, I'm going to talk about their most recent Hammer box set, which is Volume 6, Night Shadows. Last spooky season, I really got into slashers, and somehow the cover for Volume 1 of this Hammer set came up on my feed, and that artwork, I was like, what is this? I need this immediately. Of course, it's out of print, so I'm not spending $300 to get it, but it's great to look at, and it did parlay my interest into Hammer and Hammer films, Hammer horror. I have 4 of these Hammer sets now, and they all kind of revolve around different themes. They're kind of a weird side entrance into getting into Hammer. They're not the best way to get into Hammer. You see a little bit of The Mummy, a little bit of Frankenstein, but as far as like Dracula, these sets aren't like all the Dracula movies, all the Wolfman movies, all the Frankenstein movies. It's sprinkled in surrounding a theme. There's one theme that's all swashbucklers and adventure films. There's one set that's all like crime dramas. So let's get into it. Let's get into the task at hand. This is Volume 6, Night Shadows. It's got that great artwork of Captain Clegg right on the front. That is what made me want to buy this. I was on the fence thinking, you know what, you really don't need another one of these. But I saw Captain Clegg, or that image from Captain Clegg of the phantoms or whatever they are. And yeah, I couldn't stop myself from buying that. I think it subconsciously kind of reminds me of The Misfits or Chaos Is Me, the LP by the band Orchid. And we have 4 different titles here. We have Shadow of the Cat, Captain Clegg, the titular Captain Clegg, Nightmare, and the Phantom of the Opera. Each one of these bad boys has like a full-blown booklet, like a 30 to 40 page booklet, which is very nice. There's one of them there. So there's a lot to get into, a lot of extras, full-blown commentaries, different aspect ratios. So yeah, this set looks great, but let's get into the movies themselves. I really want to savor these. I kind of got into physical media as like the opposite of binge watching, as the opposite of, just like give me every episode of everything at once. I want to savor these. I want to really take them in and, enjoy them. So I'm going to make this a 2-part series. First, we're going to do Captain Clegg and Nightmare. Next time, we'll do Shadow of the Cat and Phantom of the Opera. First, I watched Captain Clegg. This came out in 1962. In the US, it was marketed as Night Creatures, and it was also incorrectly marketed as a horror film. This is not a horror film. This is much more of a swashbuckler, and it's a weird swashbuckler because you're not really on the seas. You're just kind of, there are pirates and there are sailors, but there's not a lot of, you don't see a cannonball get fired or a hook for a hand in this one. This film starts when Captain Clegg, you don't see him, but Captain Clegg sends a man to his death, has his tongue cut out, has his ears cut, and has him, abandoned on a post on the beach. But whoops, the guy lives. He comes back into some small town and actually recognizes Captain Clegg, who has started a new life as some kind of minister, some kind of clergyman in a small town. The story is kind of convoluted, not very interesting. A lot of these movies, they kind of act like they're trying to blow your mind, but I think they're really trying to blow like a kid's mind. But they're very fun to watch. Great set dressing, set design, great, costume design. Peter Cushing is always at least interesting, if not, very fun to watch. Oliver Reed is pretty fired up. Peter Cushing does end up getting in a fight with the sailor from the beginning of the film. I'm spoiling this like crazy. This movie's over 50 years old. I don't give a shit. And of course, there's some great fire at the end. I love Roger Corman films and Hammer films because when in doubt, torch the fucking joint. I didn't really love this film. There wasn't enough of the titular skeleton people. I was kind of disappointed, and like many kids in the U.S., I'm sure I was kind of misled. I thought this was going to be a horror film, and it's not. So I didn't really dive into the extras, but so far both of these movies have introductions by Kim Newman, and I'm always going to click that. Kim Newman is a British human encyclopedia of horror and terror. He looks exactly how you'd think he would, and I'd want to hang out with him. If not, at least give him a high five. I'd settle for a low five.
One of those touchstones that, and me too. I've stolen ideas from Nigel Neal. I'm not ashamed to admit it.
In the intro for Captain Clegg, he literally calls someone a rotter, which is the most British insult ever. It doesn't even sound right coming out of my somewhat Southern American mouth. The last time I heard someone called a rotter, it was coming from the Sex Pistols. He was calling Bill Grundy a rotter.
Go on, again.
You dirty fucker.
What a clever boy.
What a fucking rotter.
Well, that's it for tonight.
Next up is Nightmare, 1964. This one had the working title, Here's the Knife, Dear, Now Use It. I love when films have full sentence titles that are unnecessary. A lot of Italian films do this, a lot of giallos do this. For example, No, comma, the case is happily resolved. Don't torture a duckling. Your vice is a locked room and only I have the key. That's all. That's one title. And my all-time favorite from the Vinegar Syndrome Forgotten Gialli films, The Police Are Blundering in the Dark. Terrible movie. Incredible title. But anyway, they went with Nightmare. Nightmare follows Janet, who's a tween in finishing school, plagued by nightmares. I don't want to give too much away here. This is a good little psychological thriller. There's some, elements. Are they ghosts? Is this a dream? Is this not a dream? Is this real? And I think it ruins the fun. Something like Captain Clegg, I blew the twist, and I really don't think it matters. This one, I would not. It takes something away to know the ending of this film. This reminded me a lot of the Hammer film Taste of Fear. Obviously, it also reminded me a lot of Psycho. I keep reading that it's very similar to Diabolique. I've never seen Diabolique, I'm not French. I've seen Psycho, but you'd think this would get kind of diluted when people are referring to the movie that inspired Psycho, and this is a ripoff of Psycho, but it's reminding people of the movie that inspired Psycho. You'd think it would get a little diluted at this point, but it's a very good-looking film. One of the experts in the extras referred to this film as very glossy-looking, but with a flimsy plot, and that's absolutely true. Kind of falls down in the second act, but it's got a very good setup. The first half hour, 45 minutes are solid. I think it's up there. I mean, obviously it's not up there with Hitchcock, the full stop, but it's interesting. It's competent. This film has no business looking as good as it does. This is a very good looking film. A lot of these early Hammer black and white ones, a lot of movies just happen to be in black and white because that was the available technology, but a lot of films use black and white. You look at something like Night of the Hunter, you look at something like this, you look at something like Taste of Fear. They're using those shadows, they're using what's in front of them, they're using the light to make things spookier, to make you wonder what's behind that corner, what's in that shadow. This one was written by Jimmy Sangster, who wrote a lot of the early Hammer films. He wrote a lot of the great Hammer films. He also wrote Taste of Fear, which is almost a sister film to this film. They're close enough that they could be related. And it's a miracle that a piece of art like this actually shines through, especially 60 years later, because when you read about Jimmy Sangster, he was very formulaic, almost like a William Castle. This aspect of like, you need a twist at the 20-minute mark, you need a twist at the 40-minute mark, and then a big one at the end. It's a miracle that this movie's good at all, because it is very formulaic, but it does work, and when it doesn't work, it looks good enough to get you by. There is a thread running through this film that does keep it kind of actually frightening and still pretty fucking relevant. It harps big time. It really harps on themes of films like Hereditary and Steven Soderbergh's Unsane.
There's been some kind of mistake.
By signing this, you've consented to voluntary commitment.
I am being held here against my will.
Do you know how many calls the cops get like that every week?
Those are from crazy people.
I'm not sure if being put away in a mental institution against your will is a fear everybody has, or just the fear that, serviceably mentally ill people have. Anyway, that's all I've got for now. Next time we'll get into the rest of these bad boys, Shadow of the Cat, Phantom of the Opera. Till then, stay hydrated. Don't do anything I wouldn't do. Have a good one.